Some days, I think I miss my dad more than my mom. Which sounds wrong, I know. Mom was the one who died. Mom was the one we were all supposed to be grieving. And I do miss her, don't get me wrong. I miss her smile when she forgot herself and laughed too loud. I miss the way she burned every meal she tried to cook, and how she'd crinkle her nose and blame the oven. I miss the way she hugged like it might be the last time, every time. But Dad's still here. And somehow that's almost harder. Because every morning since she died, I wake up and watch him put one foot in front of the other. Quietly, calmly, without complaint. And it breaks something inside me. He never yells. He never wallows. He just keeps going, steady and polite and gentle, with a world that hasn't been very gentle with him. It's the same way he's always lived, really. When I was a kid, I didn't notice it much. Just figured that was how dads were supposed to be. But looking back now, I realize how rare it was. Dad was the guy who helped strangers push broken cars in parking lots. The guy who tipped twice what he should have, even when money was tight. The guy who remembered people's names, even if he'd only met them once at a gas station or grocery store. The kind of man who treated janitors and CEOs exactly the same, with real, actual respect. Not the kind you fake when you think someone's useful to you. I used to think he was kind of a doormat because of it. Soft. Not ambitious like some of my friends' parents, the ones with the big houses and bigger egos. But I get it now. Dad wasn't soft. He was strong enough not to need to shove it in anyone's face. The older I get, the more I realize. My father's the best man I know. And somehow the world never quite seemed to notice. Or so I thought. Tonight, for example. Tonight, we were standing in the middle of the Halcyon Grand Hotel's main ballroom, where everything sparkled just a little too much, and the air smelled like money. I shifted uncomfortably in the cheap rental suit Dad and I had picked up last minute. It scratched at my neck and hung weird in the shoulders. Dad, of course, looked perfectly fine. Same old charcoal suit he always wore to weddings and funerals. Pressed and clean, but plain. No flashy watch, no designer shoes. Just Dad, polished without trying. I tugged at my collar, feeling stupid and underdressed. "You sure we're supposed to be here?" I muttered, glancing at the rows of perfect people. The women floated past in gowns that probably cost more than my car. The men, all sharp tuxedos and sharper smiles, mouths sipped champagne like it was water. Dad just smiled a little. "We were invited," he said calmly. I rolled my eyes. Technically, yes. Someone had sent us a stiff embossed card, an invite to the Ashcroft Foundation's annual Winter Charity Gala. Dad said we should go. "And pay our respects," he said. "Show our faces," he said. Translation, let them see we're still standing. The Ashcrofts, Mom's side of the family. The old money, blue-blooded royalty of our little corner of the world. People who thought the words self-made were a polite way of saying, not good enough. I shoved my hands in my pockets, feeling the burn of their glances as we passed. Not that Dad noticed. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. We found a table near the back, tucked against one of the massive white pillars. Dad sat down with a quiet sigh, folding his hands neatly in his lap. I sat beside him, bouncing my knee nervously. It wasn't long before the Ashcrofts started their parade, greeting the right people, ignoring the wrong ones. Guess which side we were on? I was just starting to think maybe we could coast through the night unseen when I heard a laugh, high, sharp, and painfully familiar. Graham Whitlock, I turned. And there she was, Genevieve Ashcroft Whitlock, my father's ex-wife, Mom's cousin, living, breathing proof that beautiful people aren't always good people. She looked almost exactly the same as I remembered. Blonde hair in a tight, polished twist, diamond earrings catching the light, a silk gown the color of blood, and a smile that could curdle milk. Hanging on her arm was some guy in an expensive suit, younger than her by at least 10 years, with a smirk that made my fists itch. Genevieve eyed my father up and down, the corner of her mouth twitching. "Not still shopping off the rack, I see," she said, voice syrupy sweet. Her date chuckled, a low, smug sound. Dad rose politely, nodding once. "Genevieve," he said. Simple, calm. Like she hadn't just slapped him with words in front of half the damn ballroom. Genevieve tilted her head, feigning surprise. "Oh, forgive me," she said, turning to her date. "No, this is Graham. He used to be my... well, never mind. Ancient history." The guy snickered, sizing Dad up like he was some relic from a pawn shop. Genevieve's eyes glittered. She wanted a reaction. Anger. Embarrassment. Anything. Dad just smiled, patient and unbothered. "I hope you're well," he said politely. Her date barked a laugh. "Now you hope she's well? Man, you're a better guy than me." Genevieve laughed too, slipping her arm around her date's waist like she was showing off a new car. "Graham's always been noble," she said lightly. Tragically so, I burned. I waited for Dad to say something, to put her in her place, but he didn't. He just stood there, calm, polished, so dignified it made their cruelty look ugly by comparison. Genevieve's smile faltered, just a little. Like somehow she was the one coming up short. Her date didn't notice. Too busy preening. They moved on a minute later, laughing too loud. Dad sat back down as if nothing had happened. I stared at him. How do you do that? I demanded under my breath. He looked at me, puzzled. Do what? Let them disrespect you. Treat you like... I struggled for words. Dad smiled, a slow, sad thing. They don't define me, Evan, he said. They never did. I stared at him, heart pounding. And for the first time, I realized something. He wasn't pretending to be calm. He was calm. Because they didn't matter. Because he knew who he was, even if no one else did. The rest of the night passed in a haze of fake smiles and clinking glasses. I kept catching people glancing at us, whispering, not with scorn and with curiosity, respect. I couldn't quite tell. And then, as the clock struck 9, the temperature in the room seemed to shift. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer said, voice deep and grand, please welcome tonight's honored guests. I looked up, confused. Was there some kind of ceremony planned? Dad didn't mention anything about that. The crowd shifted, craning their necks toward the grand staircase that spiraled down into the ballroom. The announcer cleared his throat and then, Miss Liang Yue of the House of Liang, heiress to the Liang shipping dynasty, graduate of Cambridge University, chairwoman of the Lotus Foundation for Global Literacy. The room practically buzzed. Heads turned. Cameras flashed. A ripple of admiration, maybe even awe, moved through the crowd. And then she appeared. Liang Yue, the woman in green. She stood at the top of the staircase, framed by the chandelier's golden light, poised as a queen without a crown. She was breathtaking. Not just beautiful, but commanding in a way that made everyone else seem small. The announcer hadn't even exaggerated. Heiress, chairwoman, philanthropist. A woman most of the world would probably bow to, and not metaphorically. I blinked, stunned. What the hell was a woman like that doing here? She descended the stairs slowly, every movement graceful and deliberate, her emerald dress trailing behind her like mist. And then, halfway down, her eyes swept the room. She was scanning the crowd politely, probably looking for the Ashcrofts or the board members or whoever rich people cared about. And then she saw him. She saw Dad. Her face transformed. Gone was the polite royal mask she wore for the cameras in the crowd. Her dark eyes widened, stunned, and then lit up with something raw and unguarded. Joy. Relief. Something that didn't belong in a ballroom full of sharks. Her whole body shifted, almost like she forgot where she was. And without hesitation, without caring who watched, she picked up her skirts and moved through the crowd, straight toward us. I swear for a second the whole room held its breath. Dad stood slowly, confused, watching her approach. Mr. Whitlock, she said, her voice warm and soft and so personal it almost hurt. Dad smiled, half bewildered, half delighted. Miss Liang, he said, you're here? She reached for his hand, clutching it between both of hers. I heard you would be attending, she said, almost shyly. I couldn't miss it. I gawked at them. Liang Yue, a woman whose name was on skyscrapers and hospitals. Standing here, looking at my father like he personally hung the stars. Dad was clearly trying to figure out what to say. She saved him the trouble. You look well, she said, her voice thick with emotion. And she hesitated, then smiled. A real luminous smile. I owe you more than you know. Dad chuckled, still a little lost. You're very kind, he said. No, she said quietly. You were kind when no one else was. I sat there stunned, mouth half open. The son of Graham Whitlock, watching a literal queen fall all over herself just to talk to my dad. And somehow I had the sinking feeling this was just the beginning. Liang Yue and Dad stood there. A strange little island of stillness in a sea of moving bodies and clinking glasses. I could see she wanted to say more. Her lips parted slightly like there were 1,000 words pressing against them. Dad looked at her with the same patient, steady warmth he gave to everyone. But there was something gentler in it now. Recognition, memory, maybe even regret. And just when I thought they might really talk, might really let the moment settle between them, a sharp voice sliced through the air beside me. Oh, how precious, Genevieve said, loud enough for half the tables around us to hear. I jerked around, teeth grinding. She was standing a few feet away, cradling a champagne glass in one manicured hand, her date smirking by her side. Genevieve watched Liang Yue with a kind of amused disdain, like she was observing a child playing dress-up. Her voice dripped fake sympathy. I suppose even the great Liang Yue has her phases. Her date chuckled nastily. Guess charity work comes in all forms, he said, flicking a glance at Dad. Genevieve smiled thinly, sipping her drink. Dad didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just turned back toward Liang Yue with the same quiet dignity that somehow made Genevieve look smaller by comparison. And that drove her crazy. I saw it in the way her nostrils flared, the way she tightened her grip on her glass. But before she could sharpen another insult, the announcer's voice rang out again. Dr. Amara Delgado, recipient of the International Phoenix Prize for Medical Innovation, founder of the Delgado Oncology Research Institute, and senior advisor to the World Health Organization. A murmur rolled through the crowd like a ripple across water. Another heavy hitter, another someone. Heads turned toward the entrance again. I did too and caught my breath. Amara Delgado practically exploded into the room, a vision in deep red silk, her wild curls pinned half up, half loose, her eyes sparking like wildfire. She was breathtaking, but not the porcelain, untouchable kind. She looked alive, fierce and brilliant and too vivid for a place like this. And unlike Liang Yue's careful, regal descent, Amara stormed down the staircase without a second thought, moving like the party didn't even exist, like nothing mattered except finding him. And when her gaze landed on Dad, she didn't hesitate. Didn't even pretend to be polite. She made a beeline straight for him, heels clicking sharply, dress swirling around her legs. The crowd parted instinctively, whispering furiously. I heard someone gasp. Another person dropped their wine glass. Before Dad could say a word, Amara reached him, grabbed his face between both hands and kissed him. Full, on the lips. Not a chaste, polite kiss, a deep, intimate, lingering kiss. The kind of kiss that made a man forget where he was. The kind of kiss that said mine without using a single word. Dad staggered back a step from the sheer force of it. Amara didn't let go. She pressed into him, her hands sliding down his chest, her body molding against his, practically climbing him in front of 500 of the city's most powerful people. It wasn't obscene, but it was definitely not something anyone would expect to see at a black tie gala. Liang Yue looked like she'd been slapped across the face. Her expression didn't change, but her body went rigid with fury, her hands curling into tight, white-knuckled fists at her sides. Genevieve's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might dislocate. Her date stared too, blinking like he couldn't quite believe it. Around us, the ballroom rippled with stunned silence, like no one could quite figure out what just happened. And Dad gently, awkwardly pried Amara loose, laughing under his breath. Amara, he said, voice low but affectionate. We talked about this. Amara just grinned up at him, utterly unrepentant. Untalked, she said, tilting her head playfully. You're not agreed. Dad shook his head, smiling despite himself. You're going to get me thrown out of here, he said. Amara shrugged, brushing imaginary dust off his lapel like she owned him. Let them try. The way she looked at him, like he was the only man alive, sent a shock down my spine. This wasn't casual. This wasn't gratitude. This was love, real, raw, and completely shameless. I sat frozen, my brain short-circuiting. 2 women, 2 goddesses, both here for him. And somehow the night was just getting started. For a moment after Amara kissed him, after she practically welded herself to him, Dad just stood there, shaking his head fondly, like a man caught in a summer storm. Liang Yue, meanwhile, stood a few feet away. If looks could kill, Amara would have been vaporized on the spot. Liang didn't say anything at first. Didn't make a scene. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around her mouth. A glint of steel flashing behind her dark eyes. I could feel the temperature of the room drop about 10 degrees. And Amara either didn't notice or didn't care. She leaned casually against Dad's side, smiling like a cat, who'd just knocked a priceless vase off the shelf. The tension between them vibrated so loudly I swear I could hear it. Finally, Liang Yue spoke, her voice as smooth and cold as a blade. You are shameless. The words dropped into the marble silence like stones. Dad froze. Amara just smiled wider, clearly delighted. You're just mad because you don't know how to treat a man properly, she said sweetly, tilting her head like she was explaining basic math to a child. A few nearby guests gasped audibly. Liang Yue's nostrils flared just slightly. I know how to conduct myself with dignity, she said icily. Not fling myself at a man like a common... Please, Amara said, laughing, tossing her curls over her shoulder. You wouldn't know passion if it bit you on your perfect little nose. Liang Yue stepped closer, heels clicking softly against the marble. Calm, controlled, deadly. For your information, she said in a voice like silk-wrapped steel, I am older than you. Amara's eyebrows shot up. Maybe by a year, she said, smirking. But I've lived more in one night than you've dared in your whole pampered life. The edges of Liang's mouth twitched. The tiniest, most dangerous smile. That, she said softly, just makes you cheap. Amara's smile turned sharp. And you, she said, leaning in, sound like a jealous little girl who just lost before the game even started. Dad stepped between them then, fast but careful, like a man who just realized he was standing between 2 ticking bombs. Enough, he said, quietly but firmly. Both women backed off instantly, Not at him, but at each other, glaring daggers over his shoulders. Across the room, Genevieve was staring, stunned, her champagne glass hanging limp from her fingers. Her date muttered something under his breath, probably something about how he thought Graham Whitlock was supposed to be a nobody. And now here he was, being fought over by two women so stunning they could break the stock market by smiling wrong. I sat there wide-eyed, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. Dad. My dad. The guy who coached my little league team and grilled hot dogs in the backyard was standing there like the freaking sun with two world-class women orbiting around him like angry moons. And somehow, I had the sneaking suspicion. This night wasn't even close to over. The room was just starting to recover from the fallout between Liang Yue and Amara when the house lights dimmed and the spotlight swung toward the stage. A hush fell over the ballroom. That tight, brittle kind of silence that always comes right before a show. A few Ashcroft board members shuffled onto the stage, faces stiff with importance. One of them, an older guy with white hair and a tuxedo that probably cost more than my college tuition, tapped the mic. "But ladies and gentlemen," he intoned, "it is our great honor tonight to welcome a very special guest. Someone whose artistry has captured the hearts of millions around the world." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I frowned. Artistry? Dad shot me a puzzled glance. The MC cleared his throat and smiled his polished politician smile. "Please welcome the award-winning actress, humanitarian, and cultural ambassador, Miss Sophia Marinos." The double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a dramatic gust of cold air. And there she was, Sophia Marinos, movie star, model, icon. If perfection could take human form, it would look like her. She was wearing a flowing silver gown that shimmered like moonlight, her golden hair pinned up with diamond clips. She glided toward the stage like she wasn't even touching the floor, smiling graciously at the crowd, waving a little, just enough to send camera phones flashing everywhere. Somewhere behind me, I heard a group of guys, rich, handsome, overconfident types, practically fall over themselves. Bro, she's here. She's really here. I'm going to talk to her after. She's even hotter in real life." I rolled my eyes. Good luck with that, guys. Sophia climbed the stairs gracefully, took the microphone, and smiled at the room. "Good evening," she said, her voice smooth and musical, touched with a faint Greek accent. "It is such an honor to be here tonight, supporting such an important cause." The crowd applauded politely. Sophia beamed, all grace and poise. She glanced around the room, and then her eyes landed near our table. And everything changed. Her face lit up, like a kid spotting her best friend across a crowded park. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide and gleaming, and before anyone could react, she dropped the mic, literally let it clatter to the stage with a thud, and shouted across the room, "Agape Mo! Asayado!" "My love, you're here!" The ballroom gasped. Every head turned, following her gaze, to land squarely on my dad, who looked like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over his head. Sophia didn't care. She practically sprinted off the stage, bare feet flashing as she kicked off her heels mid-run, and launched herself straight at him. She crashed into him with a squeal of laughter, wrapping her arms around his neck and hugging him so hard his feet actually shifted backward. And then, with the entire gala watching, she pulled his face down to hers and kissed him. On the mouth, full lingering, adoring. Half the room erupted into whispers and gasps. Genevieve made a strangled noise that sounded suspiciously like a dying cat. Liang Yue stiffened so hard I thought she might actually snap in half. Amara whistled low under her breath, crossing her arms like she was watching a really good reality show. And the group of young men nearby, the ones who'd been fantasizing about Sophia Marinos all night, just died. I swear I heard one of them actually moan in despair. Another just sank into his chair, hands over his face, muttering, Of course she's in love with some old guy." I would have laughed, except I was too busy picking my own jaw up off the floor. Sophia finally pulled back, beaming up at Dad like he'd hung the stars just for her. She took the microphone from the stunned MC, turned back to the audience, and declared, loud and proud, "This man, Graham Whitlock, is the love of my life, and I'm going to marry him." The ballroom exploded. Some people clapped automatically, too stunned to know what else to do. Others just stared, mouths open, champagne flutes forgotten in their hands. Genevieve dropped her glass entirely. It shattered in slow motion at her feet. Dad closed his eyes briefly, pinching the bridge of his nose like he was praying for strength. Sophia didn't notice. She was too busy linking her arm through his, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. And in a way, maybe she had. I sat there, watching it all happen, feeling like I'd slipped into some alternate reality. My dad, the quiet man who still fixed his own car and read paperback novels at the kitchen table. The man I thought I knew, surrounded by women who looked like they stepped off magazine covers, fighting over him, kissing him, declaring marriage proposals at black tie galas. And the craziest part? He didn't look overwhelmed. He didn't look smug. He just looked quietly, impossibly tired. And maybe, just maybe, a little heartbroken. Because no matter how many people loved him, the one person he had loved most was still gone. For a moment after Sophia's declaration, the ballroom just sat in stunned silence. Then the whispers started, small at first, then growing like a rising tide. Graham Whitlock, a nobody, a background figure, now the center of everything. Genevieve couldn't take it. I saw her move before I even heard her voice, the sharp click of her heels cutting through the stunned murmur. She stalked toward our table, dragging her date behind her like a forgotten accessory. She stopped just short of us, eyes glittering with something ugly. You've all lost your minds, Genevieve said, loud enough that the nearest tables turned to watch. Her voice was high, brittle, dripping disbelief. She swept her gaze over Liang Yue, Amara, and Sophia, like she couldn't decide which one disgusted her most. You're acting like, she struggled for words, face flushed. Like this man is worth something. Dad didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stood there, steady and quiet. Genevieve jabbed a manicured finger at him. He's low class, she spat. Poor. A charity case my family took in out of pity. Her voice cracked with the force of it. The words hung there, sharp and ugly and desperate. For a second, no one moved. And then, almost in perfect unison, the three women turned to look at Dad. I watched them. Liang Yue, eyes soft and fierce at the same time. Amara, smiling like she knew a secret too big to share. Sophia beaming like the sun. They didn't flinch. They didn't deny it. They looked at him like he was made of gold. And then they turned back to Genevieve. Liang Yue spoke first, her voice calm and precise. You're mistaken. Genevieve laughed, short, sharp, brittle. Am I? Amara stepped forward, crossing her arms. You don't even know the man you threw away, she said, her accent thickening with anger. You think you do, but you never even saw him. Genevieve's mouth twisted. And you do? Sophia laughed, a bright, clear sound. We do, she said simply. She touched Dad's arm lightly, possessively. And we are the lucky ones, Genevieve rolled her eyes. He's a nobody, always was. Liang Yue tilted her head, studying her like she was something pitiful. Graham Whitlock, she said clearly, is worth more than every man in this room combined. Amara grinned, adding, and he's a billionaire, sweetheart. Sophia giggled, looping her arm through Dad's again. A real billionaire, she said. Not like these spoiled trust fund boys. Genevieve paled. I could almost hear the blood draining from her face. You're lying, she whispered. Liang Yue smiled, slow and devastating. Are we? Amara shrugged, tossing her curls. Maybe you should have paid more attention, she said sweetly. Sophia leaned in, stage whispering loud enough for half the room to hear. Instead of chasing men with bigger wallets. A few people actually snickered. Genevieve's hands clenched into fists. I sat there stunned. My dad, was a billionaire. A man who helped three of the most powerful women I'd ever seen, without ever once bragging about it. Without ever using it to make himself bigger. Just because that's who he was. Dad cleared his throat quietly, cutting through the tension. That's enough, he said, his voice gentle but firm. The women fell silent instantly, turning toward him like planets pulled by a stronger gravity. Genevieve opened her mouth, but whatever she saw in Dad's face made her close it again. For the first time maybe ever, she looked small, insignificant, like a footnote in a story that had moved on without her. Dad gave her a polite, almost pitying smile. Have a good evening, Genevieve. Then, with Amara on one side, Sophia clinging to his arm, and Liang Yue standing tall and proud at his other flank, he turned away, leaving Genevieve standing there, alone. And for the first time all night, I realized we weren't the outsiders anymore. The world had finally caught up to Graham Whitlock, and it had no idea what to do with him. If you'd told me that night was going to end with three of the world's most stunning women half naked in the same hotel room as me and my dad, I would have laughed in your face. And yet, here we were, or at least getting there. After the gala imploded in spectacular fashion, Dad and I made a beeline for the exit, heads down, hearts pounding. We didn't say much during the car ride back to the hotel. I think we were both still stunned. The Madre Hotel practically fell over themselves when we arrived, whispering, bowing, fussing. Somehow, they already knew. Within minutes, we were ushered into the penthouse suite, the kind of place that usually had foreign dignitaries and rock stars checking in. Dad tried to refuse, tried to say thank you, but no. But the manager insisted. So up we went. The penthouse was ridiculous. White marble floors, velvet couches, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering skyline. I dropped onto the nearest couch with a heavy sigh, running my hands over my face. Dad stood near the window, still in his wrinkled old suit, looking about as comfortable as a cow in a crystal shop. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Finally, I said, "You're, kind of a big deal, huh?" Dad snorted, a tired, self-deprecating sound. "Don't start," I grinned. "Seriously, billionaire, secret kingmaker, 3 insanely gorgeous women ready to kill each other over you." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't plan for any of that," he said. "It just happened," I laughed. "Yeah, happens to me all the time, too. Can't leave the house without 3 supermodels proposing." Dad chuckled, and for the first time that night, some of the tension in his shoulders eased. He wandered into the kitchenette, pouring himself a glass of water. I sprawled on the couch, still marveling at how insane this night had turned out. There was a knock at the door. Dad stiffened. I raised my eyebrows. "Round one?" He shot me a look, but went to open the door anyway. And there, standing barefoot on the carpet, dressed in a flowing silk nightgown under a long robe, was Liang Yue. She bowed slightly. "I hope I am not intruding," she said, her voice low and graceful. Dad stepped back immediately, waving her in. "Of course not. Please." She floated into the suite, moving with the kind of effortless grace that made even the luxury furniture look clumsy. Her hair was down now, long and loose, and there was something so soft about her, so careful. She glanced at me, smiling warmly. "You must be Evan." I stood awkwardly, giving a clumsy half-wave. "Hi." She smiled wider, and for a second the polished heiress disappeared and just a sweet, genuine woman stood there. Dad offered her water, but she shook her head politely. They sat down across from me, speaking quietly. Dad asking if she was comfortable, Liang thanking him for the evening. It felt weirdly normal, like watching 2 old friends reconnect after years apart. 15 minutes passed like that. Soft conversation, awkward silences, me trying not to stare at how ridiculously gorgeous Liang Yue looked, even in casual clothes. And then another knock, a heavier, faster, more chaotic knock. Dad sighed. I grinned. "Round 2, I whispered. He opened the door. Amara Delgado burst through like a hurricane, barefoot, wearing a hoodie that definitely wasn't hers, and might have been Dad's. Her wild curls bouncing around her shoulders. She grinned wide when she saw us. "And there's my favorite viejo," she cried, launching herself across the room. Dad caught her automatically, nearly stumbling, as she threw her arms around his neck and kissed his cheek loudly. Liang Yu's serene expression tightened like a piano wire. I sat there, watching the collision of worlds. The quiet princess and the fiery warrior, both orbiting my dad like he was the last star left in the sky. Amara plopped down on the couch beside me, propping her feet up like she lived there. "Hey, Chico," she said, ruffling my hair like I was 12. I ducked away, laughing. Dad looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. The 3 of us talked for a bit. Or rather, Amara talked, and we tried to keep up. She teased Dad mercilessly, made me laugh until my sides hurt, and somehow still managed to flirt shamelessly in the middle of all of it. Liang Yu sat stiffly, smiling politely, but watching like a hawk. And just when I thought it couldn't get any more ridiculous, there was another knock. A slow, measured knock. Dad didn't even move this time. He just looked at me like a man accepting his fate. I dragged myself up and opened the door. And there, standing barefoot in an ivory silk robe, hair loose, carrying 2 glasses of champagne, was Sofia Marinos. She grinned brightly. "Room service," she said. And then, seeing Dad, her whole face lit up. She breezed in, ignoring the fact that there were already 2 women staring daggers at each other across the room. "Darling," she cried, practically throwing herself onto the couch beside Dad. He gave a long-suffering groan and scooted an inch away. Liang Yue looked ready to draw a sword. Amara cackled under her breath. I just leaned back, watching the fireworks build. Dad tried to rally. "Listen," he said, lifting his hands like a man trying to calm a zoo full of lions. I can't marry anyone. I have a son to think about." He pointed at me helplessly, like I was his last defense. I grinned. I stretched out lazily on the couch, savoring the moment. Dad," I said, "I know you loved Mom. I know it still hurts." He looked down, his face tightening in a way that made my chest ache. "But these women," I waved a hand vaguely at the chaos around us. "They're gorgeous. They're incredible." I grinned wider. "And honestly, you'd be an idiot not to marry one of them." The women beamed at me like I'd given the Gettysburg Address. Sophia clapped her hands. Amara whooped. Liang Yu smiled, serene but smug. Dad groaned again, scrubbing a hand over his face. "This is a nightmare." I sat forward, elbows on my knees, grinning like an idiot. Seriously, I said. Oh, how do you all know my dad? The women exchanged glances, some secret, elegant agreement passing between them. Liang Yue smoothed her robe with a tiny, regal gesture. I will go first, she said, voice soft and proud. But instead of speaking, she pulled out a small black envelope and crossed the room, placing it neatly in my lap. I opened it and nearly dropped it. A black metal card. Heavy. No numbers, just my name engraved like a weapon. And a note. For your future, your honor, your kingdom, Liang Yue, $1 million. I gawked at her. You didn't have to, she smiled serenely. I wish to. And then, almost casually, she handed me another envelope. Inside, Tang Fei thinks American boys are very interesting. Call her. She is expecting you. Tang Fei. The Tang Fei. Model. Actress. Literal goddess. I think my soul evacuated my body on the spot. Before I could recover, Sophia squealed. My turn! She skipped over, nearly tripping on the hem of her robe, and dropped a pair of car keys into my lap with a wink. I blinked down. A Ferrari 812 GTS. The kind of car you had posters of on your wall when you were 10. Convertible, Sophia said brightly. Red, obviously. Parked downstairs. I think my brain crashed. She giggled and dropped another note into my hand. Eleni Konstantinos says she's very bored these days. She would love to hear from you. I actually whimpered. And then Amara swaggered up, tossing a heavy leather pouch at my chest. Inside, an invitation to the Victoria's Secret Global Launch Party in Milan. Keys to a brand new Ducati Panigale V4 SP2 motorcycle. Black, gleaming, stupidly fast. And tucked inside the invitation, another card. Valentina Cruz thinks American boys need to learn how to dance. She'll teach you. I sat there dazed, staring at the mountain of impossible gifts in my lap. Dad stared at them too, horrified. This is bribery, me croaked. Amara smirked. Bribery only counts if it's not this much fun. Liang Yue tilted her head gracefully. In many noble courts, gifts to family were considered essential. Sophia threw her arms around Dad's waist, laughing. And he's so cute. How could we not? And that's when the arguing started. Obviously, Liang Yue said, smoothing her hair, the Tang Fei connection is most appropriate. She is cultured, educated, refined. Amara snorted. Yeah, and boring. Liang's eyes narrowed, very slightly. Amara flopped onto the couch beside me, tossing her curls. Valentina will actually teach you how to live, Chico, she said. Not just sit around looking pretty, Sophia laughed, twirling a champagne glass she had somehow conjured out of nowhere. Eleni is the obvious choice, she said breezily. She's stunning, sweet, and she's already obsessed with American accents. Liang Yue raised an eyebrow. Is she capable of intelligent conversation? Amara barked a laugh. That's rich coming from the princess who just handed a teenager $1 million trust fund and no instructions. Liang Yue gave a serene smile, the kind that said, I will destroy you politely. Better a future than a reckless party invitation. Amara's grin sharpened. A better reckless than boring. Sophia clapped her hands, delighted. This is so much fun, and somehow it got even worse. Because now, they weren't just arguing about the gifts and the models. They started arguing about each other. Clearly, Liang Yue said, voice calm but devastating, I am the most suitable choice for Graham. I offer stability, honor, respect. Amara rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out. Yeah, if he wants to die of boredom by 40. Sophia waved her champagne glass, nearly sloshing it over the carpet. He should pick whoever makes him smile the most, she said. And honestly, I make everyone smile. Amara laughed, tossing a pillow at Sophia's head. Yeah, because you flash your legs at anything that moves. Sophia caught the pillow midair and hugged it. Jealousy isn't cute, darling. Liang Yue cleared her throat delicately. I do not flash anything, Amara smirked. Maybe you should. Might actually loosen you up. Dad just sat there, pinching the bridge of his nose, looking like he was considering whether it was too late to climb out the window. I could barely breathe. I was laughing so hard inside. Sitting there, surrounded by 3 of the most powerful, gorgeous, terrifying women on earth, all fighting over my dad, all spoiling me rotten like I was some kind of prize kitten, I realized something simple and brilliant. This might actually be the greatest night of my life. For a few seconds after the bickering died down, the suite was thick with the kind of silence that only happens after a really good food fight. Sophia was still hugging a throw pillow. Amara lounged like a tiger about to pounce. Liang Yue sat like a queen, one eyebrow raised, perfectly in control. Or at least pretending to be. Dad, Graham Whitlock, stood in the middle of it all like the eye of a very pretty, very dangerous storm. And then he lifted his hand, palm up, calm and certain. The room quieted instantly. The women straightened. Even the air seemed to pause. Dad sighed, a sound more tired than sad. He dropped onto one of the velvet chairs, elbows on his knees, and gave them a wry smile. You ladies, he said softly, are absolutely extraordinary. 3 sets of eyes sparkled, pleased but wary. He shook his head slowly, fondly. The gifts, the teasing, the arguments, he chuckled. It means more to me than you know. He rubbed his hands together. But it doesn't change anything. All 3 women straightened immediately. I almost laughed. The way they did it was so synchronized it looked rehearsed. Dad lifted a hand again, not to scold, just to calm. I need to say this, he said. All of it. His voice was steady, gentle, but impossible to argue with. The kind of voice that made you listen whether you wanted to or not. He turned first to Liang Yue. Her dark eyes met his, proud and unflinching. Liang, Dad said warmly, you are one of the most remarkable women I've ever met. She inclined her head gracefully. You know how deeply I respect your family, he said, voice soft. I admire everything you and your father have built. And it was my honor to help during that difficult time. Liang's jaw tightened slightly, proud, unwilling to show too much. But your world, Dad smiled faintly. It's a heavy one, old traditions, heavy expectations. He met her eyes fully. And while I might have earned a place of respect, I will never be what your family wants for you. Liang Yue's face stayed composed, but her fingers curled tightly into her robe. You deserve someone who fits seamlessly, Dad said. Not someone who will always be a complication. And, he added, teasing lightly, you want children. She stiffened. I am not so old, she said sharply. Dad laughed, a low, affectionate sound. No, you're not, he said. But I am. The softness in his voice was enough to make even Liang Yue look away. He turned next to Amara. The firebrand. The wild heart. Amara, he said, grinning despite himself. I'm on the board of directors of the Delgado Foundation. She shrugged. So resign, Dad laughed. I thought about it, he admitted. That surprised her. But if I did, he leaned back in the chair. It would hurt your reputation, your work, your mission. Amara opened her mouth, but hesitated. Dad smiled gently. And you know it. She folded her arms across her chest. Maybe I like scandal, she grumbled. He chuckled again. You like fixing scandals, not causing them. That shut her up. Amara scowled, but a tiny smile played around her lips. Because he wasn't wrong. Finally, he turned to Sophia. The youngest, the brightest, the one who somehow managed to make the penthouse feel smaller just by smiling. Dad shook his head, smiling fondly. And you, Sophia. She beamed at him like a kid caught sneaking cookies. You, he said, are dangerous. She clapped her hands, delighted. The fun kind or the scary kind? Dad laughed. The both kinds. He leaned forward slightly. Sophia, you deserve someone who's ready to chase dreams with you for the next 50 years. She shrugged playfully. Dreams are overrated. I'm chasing you. The room chuckled softly, and even Liang Yue. Dad sighed, affectionate but firm. I can't keep up anymore, he said, not sadly, just honest. And you'll realize it sooner or later. And when you do, you'll wish you hadn't wasted your time. Sophia pouted dramatically. Who says time with you would be wasted? Dad just smiled, tired and warm and full of something like peace. The room went still again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was bittersweet. Warm, real. Ling Wei rose to her feet smoothly. She crossed the room and knelt, of all things, before my dad, in her robe, in her bare feet, in front of everyone. She bowed her head. You will always have my loyalty, she said softly. Dad touched her shoulder gently, like he didn't trust himself to say anything more. Amara stood too, tossing her hair back defiantly. You're an idiot, she said, grinning. But you're my idiot. She slugged him lightly in the arm, just hard enough to make him grunt. Dad smiled, shaking his head. And Sophia did what Sophia did best. She flopped dramatically into his lap, throwing her arms around his neck. Fine, she said. Don't marry me. I'll just adopt you. Dad laughed out loud, a real laugh, deep and helpless, and hugged her back tightly. I sat there grinning like a fool, because somehow, despite everything, it was still okay. Not perfect, not clean, but real. Dad finally shoved Sophia gently off his lap and stood, straightening his jacket. I love you all, he said, but I love you enough to want better for you. They watched him, and somehow, I think they understood. Not happy about it, but understood. As the women gathered their gifts, their shoes, their pride, and drifted toward the door, Amara called over her shoulder, By the way, Chico, she said to me, you're still calling Valentina first, right? I turned bright red. Liang Yu smirked faintly. Choose wisely, Sophia blew me a kiss. Or call them all, Dad groaned. And I laughed because for the first time all night, it didn't feel like we were losing anything. It just felt like the beginning of something we didn't even understand yet. For a second after Dad stood up, For a second after he finished telling them they all deserved better, I thought maybe, just maybe, the night would finally calm down. I was wrong. Spectacularly, gloriously wrong. Sophia moved first. 1 second she was standing there, hands folded sweetly in front of her. The next, she launched herself across the room and tackled Dad right back into the couch. He grunted as she landed squarely in his lap, arms wrapping around his neck, kissing him like a girl possessed. Full-on, no holding back, movie moment kiss. Dad flailed, trying to be polite, trying not to crush her, trying to breathe. But Sophia was a force of nature, and she wasn't interested in polite. And then, because apparently the universe wasn't done laughing at us, Sophia's hands started fumbling at the sash of her silk robe. I watched, frozen in horror and amusement, as she actually started to untie it. Dad caught her wrists mid-move, gasping, "Sophia!" She pulled back, flushed and breathless, and blinked at him. "What?" Then she followed his horrified gaze and then saw me, still sitting on the couch, still watching, still trying and failing not to laugh so hard I'd fall off the furniture. Sophia froze. Slowly, carefully, she retied her robe, face flaming. "Oh," she said faintly. "Hi, Evan." I gave her a little wave, wheezing with laughter. Dad just groaned and covered his face with his hands. But the chaos wasn't over. Not even close, because while Dad was still trying to pry Sophia off him, Liang Yue had already pulled out her phone, thumbs flying. Amara wasn't far behind, pacing across the suite, firing off furious texts like she was mobilizing for war. Sophia, adjusting her robe with dignity, pulled her own phone out one-handed. "What are you doing?" Dad demanded, standing up and nearly dumping Sophia onto the floor. Liang Yue didn't look up. "I am informing my mother that I intend to marry," she said calmly. "What?" Dad croaked. "I'm notifying the board I'm stepping down," Amara added, grinning wickedly. "I can't have those conflict of interests, right?" Dad sputtered. Sophia tapped a message and sent it with a flourish. "I just sold half my brand shares," she said cheerfully. "Nothing tying me down now." Dad turned helplessly to me. "Evan," he said desperately. Help." I laughed so hard I almost pulled a muscle. But then, seeing the genuine panic in Dad's face and the insane determination in the women's eyes, I stood up. I cleared my throat. And for once, everyone actually looked at me. "Enough," I said, lifting my hands like Dad had earlier. "Everyone just stop for a second." Liang Yue paused mid-dial. Amara froze, phone halfway to her ear. Sophia pouted but dropped her device into the couch cushions. Dad sagged like a man given a temporary stay of execution. I looked straight at him. "You're scared," I said bluntly. Dad stiffened. "I'm not." "You are," I said. "You're scared that if you move on, if you let yourself be happy, you're disrespecting Mom's memory." He flinched just slightly. "And maybe you think we'll hate you for it," I said, my voice a little rougher now. "Maybe you think it's safer to stay lonely, to keep pretending it's what she would have wanted." Dad swallowed hard, staring at the carpet. I took a deep breath. "But she wouldn't," I said. The words felt like ripping open a door I hadn't touched in years. "She loved you too much for that. She would want you to be happy." The room went still. Even the women, who had been mid-rebellion, watched quietly. Dad lifted his head slowly, meeting my eyes. And for the first time all night, he didn't look tired. He just looked sad, and maybe a little relieved. Then, of course, chaos tried to resume. Liang Yue lifted her phone again. "I will inform my mother we are proceeding," she said crisply. Amara pumped her fist. "I'm already half fired. Might as well send the full letter." Sophia was pulling up a wedding planning app on her phone, humming cheerfully. I lunged forward, waving my arms. "Wait," they froze again. I laughed, breathless. "Before we start picking wedding colors," I said, grinning at all three of them, "I want to hear it." They frowned. "Hear what?" Amara asked. "Your stories," I said. I sat back down on the couch and spread my hands. "How you met him, why you love him. What the hell happened that led to this madness?" Dad groaned into his hands again. But secretly, I think he wanted to hear it too. Liang Yue smoothed her robe, elegant and composed once more. She folded her hands neatly in her lap. "I will go first," she said. Of course she would. The others settled in, Amara flopping dramatically into an armchair, Sophia curling up like a cat on the nearest couch. Dad stayed standing, looking like he wasn't sure if he should sit down or start running for the emergency exit. And me? I leaned forward, grinning, because this was going to be good.
Hey there, boys and girls. I am the story guy. Thanks for listening. The story doesn't end here. There's more to uncover, more secrets to expose, and more crazy stuff to share on the way. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next. We're just getting started.